Welcome back to The Rebel's Edge, where today Pete and I discuss why the financial stocks are going down so hard. There's a good reason behind it. And if you want to know, you got to stay tuned. Bang! Welcome back, Pete.
Yeah. Oh, you got no clapper today, huh?
No.
That's all right.
No clapper. I left it down in Puerto Rico.
Well, we missed you yesterday, but I will say this: that Justin does a heck of a nice job filling in. He's a clever son of a gun, and people love him. And I think he gets his vibe because he lives in Hawaii, which I didn't know till yesterday. It's not such a bad gig.
That's not a bad gig at all. It's almost as nice as Puerto Rico, Pete.
Yeah, well.
Well, welcome back, folks. Of course, we got the presidential debate tonight. We've got J.P. Morgan and others talking about what's going on with interest rates and who it's going to hurt. Well, I think you might guess, but we'll talk about that and a whole lot more on the Rebel's Edge. We're going to kick it off with what's going on in macro minute. China, Pete, and the trade surplus widened sharply in August due to slower than expected export growth in China. Still below forecast, but positive year on year. I'm going to say that's the macro.
All right. I think that is a very good one. And I'm going to follow it up with what else I think is also pretty damn good. CPI coming at us and PPI coming at us. And I think that data, we talk about it all the time, right? We talk about, all right, how big of a focus this has become. As a matter of fact, last week, John, I was on that Schwab network, which, by the way, those guys do a great job. And they were asking me questions about a few things. And I just said, look, these numbers have become so much more important than they once were. And we focus on them and they're catalysts. And I'm not saying it's not for the right reasons. It is for probably a lot of the right reasons, but it's something that we didn't do 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? I mean, it wasn't to the same levels that it is now. That and the Trump-Harris debates tonight, that ought to have a little bit of fire into the markets as well, I think.
Yeah, it might. And Pete, our mutual friend, Aaron Burnett, was just ripping Kamala. I don't know if you saw that, which is kind of rare. But she said, so the ALCU, the American American Civil Liberties Union, sends out a questionnaire. And apparently somebody at the Harris campaign filled it out. And it said she fully supports transgender surgeries for illegal aliens, no matter what it costs and all that kind of stuff. And Aaron was like, did you really say this? And the guy on her team said, she said it in writing and she said it verbally. So there are a fair amount of folks who probably don't feel the same about that particular issue, even if they might feel that Americans who lived here and work here might deserve that. That's debatable, I guess. But somebody who comes here illegally, we should all of a sudden, all of us should pay for some crazy surgery. I don't think so. But that was her statement. All right, Pete, fantastic futures. I'm going to say Brent is the, of course, overseas version of our WTI, West Texas Intermediate. They call theirs Brent. And those futures trade very actively also. First time since 2021, it's below $70 a barrel, Pete.
That is amazing. And we were talking about yesterday, just crude itself, WTI, at 52-week lows over the last couple of days. Just terrible. I mean, the performance of that has been amazing because we got a little bit up there towards 80 and never was quite sticky enough to hold up very long before they sold it off. I'm looking at the volatility right now, John. Markets are getting banged around pretty good today, especially the Dow if you look at it. But I'm looking at the VIX. It's getting a little bit narrower, a little bit tighter as far as where it is. Basically call it 19 to 21. I know we've gone up to 23, didn't last long. I know we've gotten below 19, didn't last long. So it looks like 19 to 21. Just always remember this, a 16 VIX means that you're going to have about a 1% move in the S&P 500, right? That's what we're looking at. What were we yesterday? Well, we are a little bit more than 1%. And oh, by the way, that VIX, it was sitting right around that 18, 19, 20 level. So I would say that the VIX has been very, very accurate on where it is right now and where it's been as far as that room, that little range that we've been in lately.
Yeah. And a lot more of this from the big cap stocks in the financial space, Pete, could put another hurting on the market and a little boost on the VIX. And why is that happening, folks? Just real quick, before the show started, we saw that JP Morgan was down 7%. Goldman's down, all of the big financial hubs. Why? Well, JP Morgan says that the interest income, the net interest income, NII, is going to be down substantially. Now, obviously, they're still making money, but they were projecting to make $91 billion on interest. And apparently, it's going to be a little bit lower than that. I'm going to say a little bit lower. Out of the goodness of their dark hearts, Pete, they might not take quite as big a bite out of consumers, but they're more than happy to be out there biting, Pete.
Yeah, they are indeed.
Well, Oracle. We'll kick it off with that because they were up, over 15% for a while today, Pete. And the reason is they've signed deals with Amazon Web Services and with Google Cloud. And apparently those AI features that Larry Ellison's company has put in are working like a charm. And their bottom line numbers, Pete, 53% rise in total performance obligations, $99 billion. But that isn't interest, Pete, like JP Morgan. This is how that company is operating, and that is a huge number.
Yeah, the strategic partnership with AWS, that's obviously something very good. You look at the Q1, they crushed it on the earnings. The revenue's up 45% for the cloud. I mean, things are going pretty well, I'd say, right now for Oracle. On top of all that, hit 52-week highs today, traded over 160. Really, really nice performance. 3 times normal volume trading in the first couple of hours versus an entire day. That's pretty impressive. And they had some strong guidance. You look at all of that, John, on top of everything else, fundamentally, it's trading at a 22 forward PE. This isn't trading at 40, 50 or something crazy. It's a 22 PE. And then, of course, free cash flow of $10 billion. I'd say Oracle is moving in the right direction. And if people haven't been paying attention, they should. This is still a stock that I think has room to the upside, given what's going on in the AI space and the expansion efforts that they're making with Oracle.
Yeah, 24 billion shares changing hands, Pete, at mid-session versus 8 on a normal session. So a lot of people, I think, were very enthused about getting both 2 of the biggest customers you could possibly get, Amazon and Google. All right, let's talk about HPE. This is Hewlett Packard Enterprise. They announced that they're going to do a public offering, Pete, to raise $1.35 billion. Convertible preferred stock. That's what this will be, which means, of course, people can dilute the stock. So getting money into the company, good thing. Diluting the stock, not a horrible thing, but that's why the stock dumped today, Pete, because in the short term, of course, if you put more supply on the market and the demand doesn't increase, you're talking about lower, and that's what's happening.
And it's not, last I looked, it was down about 6%. It's not too far off those 52-week lows, John. Now, when you look at this company, they've got some growth. It's okay. I don't think it's phenomenal by any stretch, but it's also another one that from a price to earnings perspective, it's pretty daggone cheap. As a matter of fact, it's near single digits. So there's some reasons that they could have hope, but this is a name that's going to probably press a little bit lower, at least early, for the next week or so. And then I think it's something that might be worth looking at in the future, not the immediate future. A little time, I think, is going to take it. But when you look at HPE, what they're doing with the servers and everything else, I think it's an interesting stock that's gotten themselves more involved in the AI space as well. Everybody is, of course. But They've got some hitch to the giddy up right now, I'd say, because of what they've done to the stock here with the converts.
Well, and Pete had just mentioned about Oracle and, what its PE is. You look at this one, Pete, forward PE. Oh my God. I mean, the PE ratio itself, not the forward, just the straight out, where is it now? 11.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you get a chance and you decide to do a little bit of research and a deep dive, maybe, I think this one's pretty tough to ignore, Pete.
Yes. Yep.
All right, let's hit another stock, AU. This is AngloGold Ashanti. And these guys are buying a company called Centamin for about 2.5 billion. It's a big deal. The stock traded down initially on the announcement, of course, but this is going to increase their annual production by almost 500 million ounces, Pete. Huge number. 500,000. I apologize. I misspoke. 500,000 ounces. Billion ounces would be all the gold in the world. It's going to increase by about 450,000 ounces. So in other words, like I say, close to 500 million. That's a pretty big deal.
That is, and I'll tell you what, for the people not paying attention as closely as you and I do to the markets, I'll tell you what, take a look at what gold's been doing. It took a while. It started to move. Silver can't get out of its own way. Silver continues to be underneath 30, but you take a look over at gold, it's been over 2,500. It's gotten pretty sticky over there, and then it's been sliding up a little bit further up towards 2,550. And all of a sudden, AngloGold makes this kind of an acquisition. They're going to have a lot more as far as production goes. It's going to cost them $2.5 billion. Yeah, they're going to take a little bit of a hit on that in the short term. But they also talked about, John, how accretive it's going to be within the first year. So I like everything about this, the fact that they're attacking it the way they are. And all you got to do is go out there. There's a few investment banks out there that have been talking about gold, where they think gold's going to be. Goldman Sachs is one of those. Just look at some of the projections going forward. I don't know that gold is done going to the upside. There still might be, 100, 200, maybe even more than that to the upside. They're talking about 2,700. And I don't think that's that unrealistic in the next year.
No, I don't either, Pete. And as interest rates come down, of course, it makes investments like gold and even some of the assets like Bitcoin for some of us more attractive. Why? Because they don't have any dividend. There's no yield for your gold or your Bitcoin. Now, there's ways that Pete and I could teach you how to increase your yield there. But for the most part, most people that own gold pay to store it, or they keep it in a safe or whatever. And Bitcoin doesn't pay a dividend either. So you have to know how to do that if you'd like to have a yield instrument, which neither one of these two are. But when interest rates come down, like Pete said, more attractive. All right. Quickly, Pete, Ally Financial. This one, they were speaking at the Barclays conference. It's a big financial conference. And they opened up by saying credit challenges have intensified. So you couple that with what JP Morgan said about their interest income coming down. And then you have Ally, one of these big financial institutions that says, you know what? Credit challenges, intensifying, cost of living is up, consumers aren't as strong. These are all reasons that the President Trump is leading in all the polls now, Pete, including the New York Times, because people aren't doing so well. If that debate tonight goes Trump's way, this thing's over. So we'll have to keep our eye on that, but certainly Ally, a very strong indication of a weakening consumer yet again, Pete.
Yeah, well, it's high inflation, which is something that was brought up. The credit quality, which is dropping, that's something that was brought up. The challenges that they're dealing with, delinquencies, as you brought up, John. The auto business, that's going to be up 20 basis points as far as the delinquencies. So I think that's pretty clear on where Ally thinks things are right now, and it's pretty accurate, I'd say. It's 6 times normal volume when you look at what's trading in the transactional side of things, down about 15% last I looked. Not quite near the 52-week lows, finds itself somewhere in the middle right now. But nonetheless, I think if anything, this is one that you want to look at and try to understand the markets a little bit better as far as why are we seeing some of the things that are going on today in the market, some of the selling. Obviously, you look at the financials right now and anything related into the financial industry, that is what's getting hit the hardest right now. And it's a pretty brutal, the day started off okay, and it's been going down ever since as far as the Dow with all that influence from financials.
Well, normal turnover is 2.7 million shares. It's already traded 14.9 million shares. So that's pretty ugly. I think people are paying attention to what they're saying and probably thinking, Buffett might not have been so dumb lightening up on Bank of America and some of his other financial holdings, Pete.
Right. Yeah. The one that he's holding on to, American Express. We were talking about that yesterday, Justin and I, and he's 12.2%, and he's one of I think that's his second highest position, I think, outside of Apple. After selling some Apple, even still is the number one.
Right.
You want to hit a little sports, man?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's start off, John. NFL. I think it's 1 week in, so we can do as exaggerated as we want to go. And everybody loves to do that type of thing. They immediately want to measure everybody from the first game, not taking into account the fact that maybe in the first game they played somebody either very good or very bad, right? I mean, like the Minnesota Vikings, great example. Suddenly, Darnold, people in Minnesota here think he's the next coming of Joe Montana, right? Because he beat up on the Giants. And I'm not kidding to say that, John. These people are drinking the Kool-Aid here. And I say that as a bit of a Viking fan, but I'll also say I realize how bad the New York football Giants are. They stink. They really looked awful. Daniel Jones I think he's thrown 40 interceptions, John, going into this weekend with 60 touchdowns. That is not very good for a guy who was picked when he got picked and the salary that they gave him in New York. It's pretty ridiculous. So who are the ones that really looked probably, I would say, average at best, but maybe they won their games? Chicago Bears, I thought, looked average. They kind of snuck in. They were able to win the football game. That was something that was a little more unexpected than I thought because Tennessee is really struggling. Their quarterback is not all that great. Levitt's just having a hard time still in the NFL. The Bengals didn't look all that great. The Browns, I didn't think looked all great. The Panthers, we may as well just say there's only 31 teams in the NFL because the Panthers, I don't know if they could survive in the SEC, to be honest with you right now, John. I think Missouri's got them, Alabama's got them, Georgia's got them. They all got them. That's how bad they really are. The Saints lit them up. Derek Carr looked like he was playing against nobody. I mean, it was absolutely an amazing game to watch. Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield throws 4 touchdowns. Looked pretty damn good. The defense is there. That's one of the teams I thought looked good. The Niners last night I thought looked good. And how about that running back, John, out of Georgia Tech? Nobody's ever heard of him. Christian McCaffrey was out. He's the best player, I think, but he's definitely the best running back in the NFL. And Jordan Mason steps in and goes, well, I got 28 carries for 147 yards. I might be pretty good too. So they're going to have a 1-2 punch when he comes back. Who do they play? They're going to be playing the Vikings right over here this weekend. So it's going to be pretty interesting. But what did you take away from the first week of the NFL?
Well, it seems neither New York team has a defense, Pete.
Yeah.
Now, the Jets, Gang Green, they used to be known for having a defense and no offense for years, for decades. Now it looks like it's flipped, Pete. I'm not saying what they got out of Aaron Rodgers was spectacular, but it was enough that if you had a strong defense, you're in the game. Instead, with no defense, you're not in the game at all. Like you said, you got a running back that nobody's heard of hardly, and he rushed for 147 yards against you. They just looked terrible. And the Giants, same thing. When you look around, Pete, at the money that, for instance, our buddy Dak Prescott got, 240 mil, now the highest paid player. It's not the biggest contract, but he makes the most per season based on this contract extension. He only threw for, I think, maybe 30 yards more than Deshaun. It wasn't exactly a spectacular performance. No. Not that it had to be, because the Browns, like you say, Pete, I don't know what I don't know who makes the decisions there.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people that are critical of the Dak Prescott, $240 million extension. What do people in Cleveland think about Deshaun Jackson, what they had to give up, and that huge contract, which at the time was the biggest contract for him? Because that guy doesn't look very spectacular to me.
No.
And the Browns have a great defense, usually, Pete, but not so much on offense right now.
Yeah, that offense did not look good. I agree with you. Dallas outplayed them just a little bit, but Dallas on the road, obviously first game. And I'll tell you what, Dak probably was still kind of figuring out how to get rid of the champagne after that contract he got signed right before the game practically. That was amazing. College football, John, it's always fun to talk about this one. I've got a couple for you. There's some shockers, there's some surprises, and then there's some unbelievable surprises. So we'll start off with the surprise. GBR, Go Big Red. They look like the black shirts have returned to the University of Nebraska, John. This is a school that has struggled for a while, and I'm not saying that they're world beaters because I don't know that Colorado is a world-beating type team to put you up into that area. But, everybody loved Deion last year, and they won the first 3 games, and then they won one more game. This year, they had a fist fight with North Dakota State, and they ended up on the right side of it. They went into Lincoln and had no idea what they were in for, John. The black shirts came at them. Shador didn't look like Shador, but everybody thinks he's the first pick in the draft. He's a quarterback. He's coming out. He's the best thing ever. The offensive line, defensive line. Here's what bugged me about that one. He left the field, John, before the end of the game. I know that, his dad pulled him out because, they weren't going to get anywhere. Why get him hurt? I get that. But why do you leave the field? That's something for a lot of people to think about. By the way, I still go back to the Oklahoma linebacker who got a fraction of what Shador got, and he's sharing it with all the walk-ons. I don't see any sharing going on in Colorado. I just see a guy driving around in a Rolls Royce. And like Tom Brady said, you need to get out of that damn car and get back on the field and maybe watch a little film. So a lot of things going on there. Michigan, they lost the offensive line, running back, quarterback, and of course the head coach. So is it understandable that they might get whooped in their own stadium by Texas? I'd say, yeah. Florida State is 0-2. Enough said. And then you got Northern Illinois going to Notre Dame and taking it to them, John, and running the ball. They had 35 minutes they had the ball, so they dominated that side of things. 190 yards rushing. That coach used to be here at the University of Minnesota. He's a great guy. He showed his emotion on the field. And they go into Notre Dame and win. Unbelievable. Now they're ranked number 25 in the country because of that win. Probably deserved. But Notre Dame, they had no excuses. They should have beaten Northern Illinois. They didn't. Northern Illinois, actually, they didn't just win. They beat them. They beat them in the game.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to get to Cal, Pete.
That was a good one.
You know what? Auburn is a good football school. Yeah. Cal is not a good football school. At times, Cal has had great offense, and sometimes they've had a balance of a pretty good offense and a pretty good defense. And on those rare occasions, they go to a bowl. It's usually a tertiary bowl that's way down. But this team looked good. And for them to go and beat an SEC power, because I'm going to say it, Pete, that's an SEC power.
Auburn, yeah.
You've got Bama, of course, both Mississippi schools, I think, State and U. Georgia, LSU. This is a great conference. We all give them lots of credit for Cal to beat up and beat, what was it, Pete, 21-14?
I think it was something like that. And it was at Auburn, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, on the road.
So you got damn near 100,000 people in there, and they're watching a team, that's usually graduating a bunch of engineers and poli-sci majors and things like that. Nobody in the SEC expects to get beat by a team like Cal. So that was a shocker to me.
Yep. I had the great opportunity to sit down with those guys a couple of months ago back in May when they were doing some of their practice still. And I'll tell you what, the head coach was excited. He's got a lot of ties to San Francisco area, the Bay Area, but he's an Oregon guy who was a linebacker just like his father. I mean, they have a good culture there right now that I like at Cal, John. They might be able to fit into the ACC for sure, but beating an SEC team, like you said, like Auburn, that's a nice accomplishment. It says a lot about Cal. Might say more about Auburn too. I don't know. We'll see.
Two of my favorite things, I'll leave you these two thoughts, Pete. One, they had the Texas Longhorn mascot, and he had a chalkboard, and on the chalkboard it said 600 days since the last Michigan loss. And then he comes up and grabs an eraser and erases that and goes 0.
That is good. That's good.
And the other one, Pete, is Shaquan Barkley. You want to know how bad it is for the Giants, folks? They didn't sign this guy. All the kid did was leave his heart on the field every single time he played that he was able to play for the Giants. He did that, and he is a phenomenal athlete. Well, he gets over to Philadelphia, Pete. He had 109 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 receiving down in Brazil, since a lot of you probably didn't see that one. And they beat the Packers, which, as Pete said, Jordan Love, not good with that injury that he suffered for having one of the largest contracts. That has nothing to do with whether or not you get hurt, of course. But Shaquan, I'd say that guy's making Philly look like they're going to be one of those contenders against San Francisco again.
Well, you know, John, it's kind of a funny thing too. Real quick, I'll just say this. It's funny, in the NFL, everything's about quarterbacks, but you and I both already just documented, well, maybe it's not. Look at San Francisco. They ran the ball. They did pretty well. They beat them up pretty big. You look at what you were just talking about with Philadelphia. What did they do? They ran the ball. They beat them up. Well, they didn't beat them up, but they beat them, and they won the game, and probably a lot of that had to do with running the football. Minnesota Vikings, same thing. They ran the football well. If you run the football well, by the way, Aaron Jones, who used to be at Green Bay, a big rival, who's now here at Minnesota, people are pretty excited about him. And that first game, not so bad. So I still think if I were GM, you got to have a running game. That's what wins.
Yep. Well, we appreciate all of you joining us today, folks. I'm sure some of you will be watching the debate this evening. And we certainly will be commenting on the reaction that voters have to it tomorrow on the Rebels Edge, which comes your way at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you then. Bang.